Stressed over your family's dietary restrictions? These 3 recipes are sure to provide you the solutions you need this Thanksgiving. Stuffing is a main aspect of Thanksgiving dinner, and it's one of those recipes that probably is not gluten-free when you're looking at your traditional recipes. So I have one today that if you have someone who is newly diagnosed as celiac and you're making a stuffing recipe for them, this is a great way to do it. So it is a cornbread cheddar rosemary stuffing. So lots of flavor. I have some already made cornbread here. You want about 8 cups. You can do more or less based on how much you have left over. But it really is dependent on, how many people you're serving. And this is gonna serve about 8 people. So right now I have some celery and onions that are sauteing. So once that has cooked for about 10 minutes, we are gonna add about a cup of red bell pepper, which I think gives it just a really nice color. We're really getting all of those fall colors in. And you're gonna hone your dicing skills with this after you do your onions and celery, but you can always purchase it already chopped. You can also purchase a frozen pepper and onion. I did that recently with a soup. And it's one of those hacks that is so simple, but I so often forget to do it. So you can always do that to save yourself time. Okay, so we have about a cup of red bell pepper. I'm gonna add that in. And then I have some of my beautiful rosemary here. You have to have those fresh herbs for the holiday dishes. It's, in my opinion, it just smells like the holidays. And rosemary I like because unlike some of your other herbs to have to pull off of the stalk, the stem, this one is just so easy. So we're just gonna chop up. You wanna do about a tablespoon. Rosemary is a pretty strong flavor, so if you feel like that's not your cup of tea, you can also use some fresh thyme if you want to. That's another option. Some sage, lots of different options for what herbs that you want to put in. But the rosemary, it's definitely a flavor that it's going to come through. Just going to mix those together, and we're gonna let that go for another 5 minutes. Now let's move back to our cornbread. So into our cornbread, we are going to put 2 eggs. Now, if you want to keep this recipe egg-free, my recommendation would be you can do maybe some pumpkin. You do a 1/4 cup of pumpkin per egg. It's going to give you that binding. It'll be an orange color. It might not leaven as much as what the eggs are gonna fluff it up. So what you might wanna do is just add a little bit of baking powder to make sure that you just can get that rise a little bit. And then we're going to add 3 cups of low sodium chicken broth, which is just shy of, it's a cup shy of the whole box. Usually 4 cups a box. And this is really gonna soak into our bread, and we do want it to not be a dry stuffing, so it's important that we give it enough liquid. And if you feel like it needs more, maybe you went, a little heavy-handed on the cornbread, that's okay, just add a little bit more. And then we have some smoked paprika, which just like adding those fresh herbs, smoked paprika is one of those spices that really goes a long way to adding in your nice flavor, really packs a punch. And I'm doing about a teaspoon, teaspoon and a half. Okay. Then we are going to turn off our heat. Now, under normal circumstances, you would let this cool because you don't want it to be your eggs. You don't want to start cooking it. So I'll give it a minute to cool. And I am just combining very gently. I don't want to over mix. I just sort of want to get the dry cornbread to hit into all of those wet ingredients. And it's going to start to look a little like oatmeal. All right, now I'm gonna add my veggies in. And you can already see just the yellow cornbread color, the red, the greens. It's just such a beautiful recipe. All right, and then our last ingredient is I'm going to add a cup of cheddar cheese. You can use sharp or mild. I'm keeping this organic. Again, we are always in tune to whatever dietary lifestyles you follow at ShopRite. So we have a lot of things in our wholesome pantry line to make that easier. Now the recipe calls for a cup and a half. I like to do a cup in the filling, and then I like to put a half a cup on the top because that's gonna help to brown it, and we're gonna get that lovely crust when we cook it. Okay, so So we're gonna put this into our pan. And then we're just gonna spread it out. And truthfully, if you are looking to use really any bread that you have left over, it's one of those great recipes for reducing food waste to make dressing as a side dish all season long if you want to keep that spirit going. It's a nice way to reuse different bread products that you might have left over. So I'm just putting a half a cup on top, and you're gonna cover this and cook it for a half an hour at 350 degrees, and then take the cover off the tin foil and cook it for another 15 minutes. And then it is going to brown up, and you have a beautiful rosemary cheddar cornbread stuffing. So hopefully, if you are getting a little bit nervous that you've got to get a dressing recipe ready for someone in your family who is gluten-free and you want it to impress the entire table, I'm telling you, this is your recipe. These butternut squash and apple Wellingtons are a vegetarian take on a beef Wellington. So instead of a beef tenderloin, we are going to use a butternut squash. So we're gonna start by making our tenderloins. So what we're going to do is you want to first find a butternut squash that isn't super thin in the neck. You want it to, have the same sort of shape as if you've seen, the filet mignon tenderloin. That's essentially what we're going for. And then you're gonna cut off the top and you're gonna cut the bottom. And you want to make sure that you get the part in the neck that doesn't have the seed. You can dig the seeds out and roast this and have it on the side, but for the purpose of making these tenderloins, we're gonna leave those aside. Then you're gonna take your vegetable peeler and we're going to peel the outside. You can wash the skin if you don't wanna do this part, but a lot of the goodness of this recipe is gonna be going around the butternut squash. So I recommend you could just take the vegetable peeler. You don't even have to work your knife skills. Just take the vegetable peeler. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to cut your butternut squash into tenderloin pieces. So what I'm gonna do is, I think I could get about 3 out of this neck. And we're just gonna cut them. Yes, you want them to be on the thicker side because of the other parts of this recipe. So now what we're going to do is, I have a mixture of olive oil, nutmeg, and cinnamon, and we're going to brush our butternut squash with that mixture. When you are cooking with vegetables and you want to make them taste delicious, making sure that you are seasoning every single portion is going to go a long way to making it delicious. So after you have coated all of your butternut squash, you're going to put it on a baking sheet at 400 degrees for 40 minutes. You want to start these cooking. You want them to be firm, but not mushy. So 40 minutes will be a good amount of time for that. And when they come out, they're gonna look like this. So you have these caramelized, and they're sort of beef looking, butternut squash tenderloins. So I'm gonna now put aside my butternut squash, and we're gonna talk about the filling. So if you've ever had a beef tenderloin, there is this mushroom mixture that goes alongside the tenderloin, and then it gets wrapped with puff pastry. We're gonna do that. What we're going to use instead, though, is a mixture of walnuts, of sage, and of apples. You can use Granny Smith, you could use Honeycrisp, whatever flavor you're going for. And you're gonna saute that together with some shallot and let it cool. So you have this really lovely mixture, and that's going to act, as that outside filling. And then the last bit before we start our assembly line, I have some of our Wholesome Pantry cranberry sauce, and I'm going to put a tablespoon of balsamic glaze in there. Similar to the walnuts, that balsamic glaze is going to help us with that meaty kind of umami flavor. And we're just gonna mix that together. Then you have your puff pastry layer. You are going to roll that out and cut it into strips. However many of your butternut squash tenderloins you have, you're going to cut those strips. And you just want to match it as best you can to the width of your butternut squash tenderloin. So what you're going to do is take the cranberry sauce mixture and you're gonna put that down first. And you're just going to layer it and make it nice and smooth. And this is a very fun recipe. If you don't mind getting your hands dirty and you don't mind your kids getting their hands dirty, they can definitely help you with this. Then we're gonna take our apple walnut filling and we're gonna press that down into our cranberry sauce and into the puff pastry. You wanna use your hands as your tools, because if we don't press it in when we start to roll it, things are gonna start to fall out, which is fine, but ideally we want as much of this flavor to stay in as possible. Okay, then we're going to take one of our cooked butternut squash rolls. Now, this is what I learned from doing this once before. You want to leave a nice amount of puff pastry as a little bit of a tail, because that's gonna really help you when you roll and help it stick together. So we're gonna roll it, and then we're going to curve it. Ideally, it's one layer around, but it's okay if you end up with two, because again, this is really, really delicious. So then we're just gonna adjust it, and you could see that you have all those elements of that tenderloin, but in a vegetable dish. So then it's gonna go back in the oven for another 20 to 30 minutes. If you wanna get fancy, you can crisscross score the puff pastry on the outside, making those X indentations, because that's very similar to what they do with the beef Wellington, but you don't have to go that far. And then after 20 minutes, it's gonna come out caramelized and beautiful, and you have such a lovely main plant-based dish for your vegetarian guests, or a wonderful side dish for those who are eating turkey. Either way, it is a beautiful way to include a lot of different colors, vegetables, nutrients, and tons of flavor in your Thanksgiving meal. Chocolate mousse is one of those recipes that doesn't always come to mind when I'm thinking about desserts, but it's so simple and yet so elevated, especially with a couple of the additions that I'm going to use today. The other great thing about this recipe is it's very diabetic friendly because of the ingredients that I am using. So I have melted down some sugar-free dark chocolate chips, and that is going to really add the flavor to our chocolate mousse. Whether you are using a cocoa melting chocolate and then adding a little stevia, there's a couple of different ways to get that desired effect if you're looking to keep the sugar low. You can also use a allergy-friendly chocolate chip if you are looking to make this with an allergy-friendly chocolate. So a lot of different ways. So I melted these down, did it in the microwave, not a double boiler. Just make sure you do it on low power and keep watching it. For those of you who've watched any of the videos from my kitchen, especially during the pandemic, there were a lot of burnt chocolate desserts that happened. I just added a quarter cup of heavy cream, because we're essentially making this into a ganache, and adding the heavy cream is going to make it combine nicer into our whipped mousse cream. All right, we're good. So now for our whipping cream. So we have 2 cups of whipping cream. Now here's a little secret. If you don't want to go through the process of hand whipping or using a mixer to make your own whipped cream, you can just get the non-dairy whipped topping. You can go with a reduced fat version of that too if you're looking to make this a little bit more heart healthy. And you could skip this step in terms of the whipping and just add these extra ingredients. And essentially you're gonna get the same thing with a little bit less work. So that's my little shortcut for you. So I'm gonna add a teaspoon of vanilla extract, half a teaspoon of orange extract. You can also use a lemon extract for this. You can do almond, whatever you like. And then we're gonna do a tablespoon of zest. From my perspective, whenever I am zesting a citrus fruit, it's not something that I care to measure out onto a cutting board and keep zesting. So if it's a tablespoon, I'm usually going to assume on an orange, it's about the whole orange. It's so strong, those perfumes and the oils from the zest, so it's a little bit's gonna go a long way. but it really just is such a nice smell. So I usually just do the whole orange because you really want that flavor, especially if you are making a dessert that is lower in sugar. Having those other components like your extract, like your citrus zest, to give it more flavor is going to come in handy. That way it's still a really intense flavor dessert, but you're not missing the sweetness because we didn't add sugar to this. So now I'm just gonna start my hand mixer on low. And you wanna do it on low for a minute or two just to start combining everything. And then after a minute or two on low, that's when you're gonna rev it up. And that's as easy as it is to make your own whipped cream. So if you are looking for something that is lower in sugar and you're just looking to get that consistency, then by all means, you can make your own. But one thing I will say that you wanna watch out for is if you're using a stand mixer, in 1 minute or so, it can go from being a nice medium whip where those soft peaks have formed to a butter. So just make sure you're watching that so that way you don't over whip it. So then after this is whipped, what you would do is you would add your chocolate into the whipped mixture. And again, you want to fold it gently because you don't want to deflate all that air. It's gonna lose some volume, but again, you just don't want to, you don't want it to deflate entirely. So I have some finished over here to spare you the watching me whip cream for 3 to 5 minutes. And we're just going to scoop it out. And I said we were gonna elevate this mousse. So I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna do. We're going to make it nice and even in our little canister. And then I have sauteed and toasted up some hazelnuts and put in some rosemary. So we are going to top it with that. And it's nice and simple and you can make it ahead, keep it in the fridge and just plate it up for those who are watching their sugar at your holiday table. If you enjoyed these recipes, like and follow for more.